I'm gonna wait like a minute and then we'll get started. But if you're just coming in, what you're seeing on your screen, that tiny URL, if you want to go to that, it's like a Google Drive folder where I've put stuff, because I've taught this before with a couple different groups. I taught it at Summerfest last summer, and so there's lots of resources there, and there is an Enneagram test, but I'll give you the link to that later because there's a whole thing about tests. So we'll talk about that. We will talk about it. Okay, well, then I'll probably, hi Ramina, hi Stan, hi Jill. I'm gonna go ahead and, okay, so if you're just tuning in, what I told a few people when we first got in here was, if you will like mute your microphone for now, but like jump in at any time and just unmute yourself before you speak, but just so that there's not like background noise, unless you know your space is completely silent or whatever. But even then we can get some like feedback kind of stuff. So feel free to jump in and chime in at any time. But yeah, okay, so I'm gonna go back to the top of this. Okay, so here's what you need to know. I think this is my first, yeah, okay, so here's my disclaimer about this. I'm just a nerd about the Enneagram. I am not, also, I cannot turn the notifications on my email off, so just know that those sounds may happen. I'm just a nerd about it. I'm not a professional. I've thought about going and doing like a certification thing for it, and I think that would be super fun. But at this point in time, don't take anything I say as gospel truth. It's just me chatting about the nerdiness that is my obsession with the Enneagram. So it's also, excuse me, just need to clear my throat. No worries. It's also not something that is like, oh, well, she's just an 8, so that's how she behaves. Like, that's not the point of the Enneagram. It's not, the goal is not to like categorize people into 9 types and say that there are only 9 types of people in the world and that's all you've got. In fact, the more you dive into it, you'll see like there's a lot of complexity. And so you might be a 4, but then you might be a 4 who has a stronger 5 wing, and then you might be more socially driven than self-preservation driven and all this stuff. Like it can get really crazy. The point is, remember that it is not saying that there are only 9 types of people in the world and you fall into one of these 9 types and that's it. It's also not saying, well, this is just how a 6 behaves, and so this is how I'm going to be, and so you just have to deal with that because this is what a 6 is. It's never the goal to like dismiss a flaw or a weakness in our character. It's the idea is to point those out to us and help us move toward growth in those areas. And it certainly has for me. It has helped me out a ton with that. And so it's all about self-growth, not like just like self-identification, if that makes sense. You should also really, and I'm the world's worst about this because I really want to figure people out, but you should avoid trying to figure out what someone else is, like figure out what their number is. Because the whole thing about the Enneagram is that it is very internal, whereas something like a Myers-Briggs, or I don't know what the other ones are called, but you know, like if I'm trying to figure out what color I am or what animal I am, that's a lot about how I interact with other people and with the world. But the Enneagram is like how I respond to things internally and how I, what my reaction is to things and how I interpret stuff that comes to me. And so because of that, it's going to be very hard unless you know a person really, 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 really well. It's going to be very hard to figure out what their internal response to something is. So an external response is easier to see, and we might be able to say like, oh, you're an INFJ. I'm just saying numbers. I know that those are letters. I know that those are the letters that they use, but I have no idea what an INFJ is. But it's going to be harder to say, oh, you're definitely a 7, right? I still like to try, but I shouldn't. That's the thing. Okay, so if you've seen anything about the Enneagram, again, y'all, please feel free to chime in. Like, you don't have to just sit there silently if you want to. But if you've seen anything about the Enneagram, you've seen this symbol, and it feels very like new agey and magic-y and that kind of thing. It's really, I mean, I guess it could be, but it's really just a graphic that has been around for I don't even know how long. But it shows it gives us the points of the Enneagram, and we'll talk a little bit about how each number moves toward growth and toward another number in growth and toward another number in stress. And so that's what all the connecting lines are. So if the top point is 9, because that's what it is, it's 9, and then if you're moving like a clock, it goes 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 9 is going to move toward 3 and toward 6, and so that's why we get those lines down that way. We'll talk more about that in a second. There's a lot of stuff that with the Enneagram, it doesn't really make a lot of sense until you get like the whole picture, and then you can be like, oh, okay, now I understand what's happening. Okay, so what even is the Enneagram? So it's a personality typing system that sets up 9 basic types, and then there's lots of variances within each of those. And the way you determine what your type is, it boils down to a basic desire or a basic fear. So it's your basic desire may be to feel valued, and your basic fear may be to feel worthless, right? And so that would tell you that you are this number. The name sounds really complicated, but it just means 9 and a picture, right? Like a written drawing. And that it's old. It's super, super old, and there's a lot of controversy as to where it came from and who originally started it and what was the purpose. I don't know. It just still feels very applicable today, and that's kind of what I take away from it. Okay, so things that you need to know about the Enneagram and figuring out your number. And there are a lot of there's a lot of like confusion and misinformation out there about the Enneagram. So I'll hear people say things like, I'm a 3-wing 8, and like that's not possible. You can't do that. You can't be a 3-wing 8. So things that you need to know: you aren't going to change your personality type. According to the Enneagram, your personality type is set in stone at a very, very early age. And while you go through periods of time in your life where you are healthier or stronger, like as far as your growth goes, like stress and that kind of thing, you are not going to change your number completely. So you're going to always be, if you're a 6, oops, sorry, let me go back. If you're a 6, you're always going to be a 6. Again, like you may look a little different in different periods of time because your life is a little more stressful, or things are going really well and you're in a place of security, that kind of thing. But you're not going to be a 6 as a teenager and then become a 4 as an adult. Also important to note is people are different, and like I said, there's a lot of variance in between each number or within each number. And so when you look at like a list of like attributes of a 5, you may feel like 95% of them apply to you, but these 2 or 3 don't. That's completely normal. There are things, I'm a 3, big time. There are things about 3s that don't really apply to me. Typically speaking, 3s are like not connected to their emotions and connected to how they're feeling, and will like really shove that down. And I think I've gotten to a place in my life where I don't necessarily want to deal with my feelings, but I know them and I understand them and I see them, right? And I'm not like shutting them down completely. It's also important to know that the numbers are just a way. It could have been anything. It could have been letters. It could have been shapes. It's just numbers. So there's not like a significance to that. It's not like, oh, 3s are so much better than 6s because we're 3 ranks higher. Like, no, that's not, it doesn't matter. That's unimportant. And like I kind of mentioned, every single number is going to move toward another number and like act like that number a little bit in a place of security or a place of stress. Every single number does that. And so there's no type that is like better or worse than anybody, because there's always somebody that's going to be like, in growth, I look more like a 6. And so in stress, somebody else looks like a 6. And so all the numbers have their strengths and their weaknesses, if that makes sense. And so, yeah, that's important to remember. Hey, if you're just joining us, which is super fun, I'm so excited. There's so many people on here right now. I muted a few people, but if you'll just like just because of background noise and stuff, because it can get real loud, if you'll just stay muted until you want to chime in at any point. Like, it does not have to be me just sitting here talking for the next 30 minutes, but chime in at any point, but just keep your microphone muted otherwise. Cool. Also, I didn't say this in the beginning, but now that there's a bunch of people here, there's not a chance we're going to get through all of this. So I was kind of thinking, like, if this goes well and it's fun, maybe we'll do a part 2 next week or something. If people are into that. I know people just kind of want to see people's faces at this point, and I'm happy to provide a platform for that. So it'll be kind of fun. Maybe we can get through the basics today and then start looking at some numbers next week, or a few of them today or whatever. Okay, so let's get into more of this. All right, so a lot of people, when they start looking at the Enneagram or reading, there's a lot of really good books. If you just jumped in, I've got a link that I'll give you that has like this little slide share thingy in it, and it has a lot of resources that I like to use. There are tons of books out there about this. There are some that, a lot of the ones that are written lately, just so you know, do have a more like spiritual, faith-based slant. You don't have to approach the Enneagram from that perspective at all, but it is used in a lot of faith-based circles these days, and so a lot of them will have that there. I still think the books, even if that's not your thing, I still think that a lot of these books are very valuable. The one that I might say, there's a book called The Sacred Enneagram. That's very faith-based. If that's not your thing, you might not be into that. But otherwise, I still think you can get a lot out of it, just basics. So there's a book called The Road Back to You, which I think is a really good place to start. It has, we'll see them here in a second, but it has kind of like lists of what it's like to be a 2, what it's like to be a 7, what it's like to be a 6. And it kind of helps you identify your number. But what's really hard about it is, as you read through these things, they're almost all negative. They're almost all terrible. They make you feel like the worst person in the world. And that's because it is easier for us to identify ourselves by our negative qualities and our responses to fear and to stress than it is to identify ourselves by like the good things about us. Because I can look at Holly and point out all the good things about her. It's harder for her to recognize those things about herself. Or I could look at myself and be like, oh yeah, I'm totally that person. I love this is so true about me. And it may not be when it comes to like positive qualities, but with our negative qualities, if we can get really honest with ourselves, we can see those things. And that's what really separates us out and sets us apart a little bit more within these numbers. And so if you can get past like how it feels pretty negative in the beginning, it's really liberating and freeing. But you do have to recognize that first. Figuring out your type. When it comes to taking a test online, and I know a lot of people, like I've seen a lot of my friends sharing Enneagram tests lately, and I'm like biting my tongue because some of them feel pretty inaccurate. The tests give you about a 50% chance of actually like dinging you for your number. You have to be very self-aware and very honest with yourself on a test. And even then you have to be like, so when I took a test, it dinged me as a 3 right away because I'm like a textbook 3. And like you can ask any of the 3 questions and I'm probably going to answer it in a 3 way. And so it wasn't that hard for it to figure out that that's what I was. But if you are a 4 that kind of looks like a 7 or something like that, like it's going to be a little bit harder for it to recognize that about you. And it has to still be a really good test too. So I have a link that I'll give you toward the end of this. That you can take this test. It's a free test. You do have to like put your email address in, but I've never I think I've maybe gotten a few emails from them. They're not real spammy at all, and it's the best free test that I've found. Again, reading about each type is the way to go. And so on this, I'm going to give you those lists from The Road Back to You, and so you at least will get like a good baseline idea of what number you might be. And then if it's something that super interests you, dig into it, start reading more about those numbers and see like, is this something that resonates with me? And yes, I'm a 6 because of all these things. And then, I mean, it's very expensive, but you can work with an Enneagram coach who can help you determine your type and help you figure things out. Like, I mean, that's pretty extreme, but even talking with a friend who knows quite a bit about it, like you can kind of talk through some stuff and figure out like, oh, maybe I'm this. Okay, this is where it starts getting real complicated, so just hang with me. So you have that diagram of the Enneagram. And so it kind of looks like a clock face, but it starts with 9 at the top, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, jumps over to 5, 6, 7, 8. Your wings are going to be the numbers to either side of you. So earlier I said, like, you can't be a 3 wing 8. That's not a thing. So if you take a test and it tells you like your number one, I'm sorry, the light is changing so much on my screen. I don't know what's going on. But if it tells you like your number 1 is a 3, but then your number 2 is an 8, it doesn't mean you're a 3 wing 8. It means you most, according to this test, you most closely associate with 3s, but you also closely associated with 8s. And so you probably need to dive into that and read a little bit more and see which one might make more sense to you. So your wings are the numbers on either side of you. So I'm a 3, which means I have a 2 wing and I have a 4 wing. If you're a 1, you have a 9 wing and a 2 wing. If you're a 9, you have an 8 wing and a 1 wing, right? What that means is you are also going to have some of the characteristics of those numbers. So if I'm a 3, I'm going to also at times have some characteristics of a 2, and I'm also going to have some characteristics of a 4. It may be that more often than not, I have more 2 characteristics and not 4. So sometimes there's kind of 2 schools of thought, is that one, like you have 1 wing and that's it. So I am a 3 wing 2. I tend to think that you use both wings intermittently, and like sometimes maybe my 4 wing comes out more and sometimes my 2 wing comes out more. When I look at the people around me who know what number they are, that's what I see most often. Like I don't really see people who are just this. Like I think a lot of times you can kind of vacillate, and in different settings and different situations you use those numbers, those wings a little bit more, if that makes sense. Any questions so far? Anybody got questions? Okay, cool. I just want to make sure you know you can ask them. And then I mentioned, yeah.
What are the wings for a 4?
So you'd have a 3 wing and a 5 wing.
Okay.
It's always going to be the numbers on either side of you, always.
Oh, sorry, you said that.
No, it's fine, but that's something that people get really confused about. So like a 6 is always going to have a 5 wing and a 7 wing, always. And you can kind of determine, and there's lots of things that we'll talk about, like what does a 6 wing 7 look like? What does a 6 wing 5 look like? And you can determine, like most often I am this. But when I look at a 3, like I totally relate to the 3 wing 2 and the 3 wing 4. And I can recognize that at different times in my life, I am those people. So I don't know. Again, different schools of thought, but that's kind of where I'm at. Okay, so this is where it can get a little confusing too. And this is why it's important to recognize that, like, yes, we may, if you buy into this, because that's a whole nother thing. You may leave this being like, that was the craziest 35 minutes of my life I've ever spent. That was dumb. And that's totally understandable. But if you buy into this, like I am a 3, but in growth, I go to 6. In stress, I go to 9. I have a 2 wing and a 4 wing. And then like, I feel like I have some characteristics of a lot of different numbers. No one is like, I am a 3 and that is all I am. And this is just like, everybody has a little bit of all of this, if that makes sense. So each number, when you are in a place in your life that is stressful, sometimes even just small situations, but if you're in a period of your life of stress, then you may act more like another number. So let me explain. I'm a 3. In stress, I go to is the term that we use to. So that's that little, because it can have like an arrow, it's that line, right? So when I'm stressed, I go to 9. I become more like a 9. So let me tell you right now, when I am stressed out, all I want to do is take a nap. That's all I want to do. I just want to shut the world out. I don't want to do anything else. I want to go to sleep. I want to escape from it. And that is a very 9 thing, to just want to like withdraw and not engage in whatever is going on. It's a negative side of 9. And that's the other thing, is that when you're going to a number in stress, you're taking on a lot of their negative characteristics. But when I am in a place of growth and security, and I feel healthy in my myself, then I'm going to become more like a 6. And so I'll say that the last few years I've seen this within myself. And so instead of one trait of a 3 is, those of you who know me are going to be shocked, but it's to be highly competitive. That is sarcasm. And so highly competitive and very driven by achievement and success. And I think that that is still a huge part of who I am. But most of my life, I was in a pretty unhealthy place. I feel like the last couple of years, I've been in a fairly healthy place when it comes to those things. And so I feel like I've moved more towards 6. And a 6, in doing that, I become much more team oriented, much more driven by like the experience and not necessarily the medals that may come at the end of it. It's a lot more about like the group success as a whole instead of just making me look good. So when you're moving toward growth, moving toward a number in growth, then you're going to take on like the positive characteristics of those numbers. And each number has, so like 3 goes to 9 in stress and 6 in growth. And then like 2s, I always mix the numbers up when it's not 3, 6, and 9 because they're a perfect triangle and they go toward each other. The rest of them I get confused. But like a 1 is going to go to 7 in growth. And they're going to become a lot more fun, the life of the party. They're going to go to 4 in stress, like way withdrawn and like willing to like wallow in their emotions a little bit more than maybe they normally would. So every number has someone that moves toward it in growth and someone that moves toward it in stress. And so it just goes to show that like every single number is important. There's not one that's like a better one to have or be. Does all that make sense so far? And I always tell my kids, when I ask, does that make sense? It doesn't mean, are you smart enough to understand me? It means, am I communicating clearly? Any questions on that? Yep? No? Okay, cool. I don't know why I keep doing that when I can just do this. Okay, so when we're looking at the 9 basic types, and so now this should help, like, if you're looking at this, it should help you understand a little bit better. They each have like a name. There's like 3 or 4 different schools when it comes to the Enneagram, and each of them are going to call it something a little bit different. So like with a 3, like sometimes I'm called the performer, sometimes I'm called the achiever, that kind of thing. The 1 is going to be the perfectionist or the reformer. And so when you see different names for them, that's why. It's because there's like 3 or 4 different schools that kind of teach the Enneagram, and they all have their own names for them. But you can see these arrows. So a 1, if you look at the pink arrow, that's what the number will go to in stress. And the white arrow is what it goes to in growth. So like if we're looking at a 1, the pink arrow, it's going to go to a 4 in stress and to a 7 in growth. A 2 is going to go to an 8 in stress and to 4 in growth. All that making sense right now? And so like I said, all that means is if I'm a 7 and I become more like a 1 in stress, then I'm taking on some of those negative characteristics of a 1. So I'm going to become very black and white. Things are right and wrong. I need like order, and that's what I'm going to defend. But if I'm in a period of growth and I'm more like a 5, then I'm like learning all the things, and I want to before I just jump into something like a 7 might, like I'm going to research it a little bit more, and I'm going to like invest a little more time, and not just be the first one to like jump off the boat just for fun. Make sense? Yeah, cool. Okay, I'm not going to go through all of this, but you can look through it yourself at some point. But it's just this really cool chart. YourEnneagramCoach.com is the website that has the tests that I really like, and it has a ton of resources, and most of them are free. Their Instagram is really good as well. But this just kind of shows you for each type, and it is kind of faith-based. So if you look like at the bottom, you're going to see some things that are a little more faith-driven. But if you look at this chart, like it's going to tell you a few things about each type and kind of clarify some stuff on there. Okay. All right. So we've got like 10, 15 minutes. Does anybody have any questions before we jump into the numbers? We could just kind of start going through some of the numbers and then just see how far we get. Is that cool? Okay. All right. So if we're starting, a lot of times people will start with 9, but we're just going to start with 1. It's easier. So this is the list from The Road Back to You that kind of gives you what it's like to be a 1. With each of these lists, again, like I said before, it is not going to be, it's not that every single thing on this list is going to apply to you. And it's not that every single thing is going to be like, oh my gosh, yes, that is so me. But if you start feeling like one of these resonates more with you than another, there's a good chance you might want to read into that one a little bit more and like do a little more research and find out a little bit about it. I'll say that when I picked up the book, it does start with 9. And so like I read through 9 and I was like, I see some of that stuff. I see a little bit of it, but it doesn't really feel like me. I looked at 1 and I was like, okay, yeah, I could see that. I looked at 2 and I was like, yeah, that makes some sense. And then when I got to 3, I was like in tears because I was like, someone sees me. Why are they reading my journal? Because it just felt so much like me. That may not be your experience. It was for me, but that may not be yours. So for a 1, I'll tell you, like my roommate is a 1 and she's like almost textbook. And so most of these things applied for her, but not all of them. So people have told me I can be overly critical or judgmental. I beat myself up when I make mistakes. I don't feel comfortable when I try to relax. There's too much to be done. I don't like it when people ignore or break the rules. Well, the conversations that have been had about toilet paper hoarding in this house with my 1 roommate were intense, very intense. Don't you understand that if I can't get hand sanitizer, then I can't be clean. It doesn't matter if you are. Anyway, lots of that. Details are important to me. I often find that I'm comparing myself to others. If I say I'll do it, I'll do it. It's hard for me to let go of resentment. I think it's my responsibility to leave the world better than I found it. I have a lot of self-discipline. I try to be careful and thoughtful about how I spend money. It seems to me that things are either right or wrong. I spend a lot of time thinking about how I could be a better person. Forgiveness is hard for me. I notice immediately when things are out of place. I worry a lot. I'm really disappointed when other people don't do their part. I like routine and don't readily embrace change. I do my best when working on a project, and I wish others would do the same so I wouldn't have to redo their work. And I often feel like I try harder than others to do things correctly. So that's a 1. So type 1s are known as the reformer or the perfectionist. And that is because for a 1, they very often see things very black and white, right and wrong. And when they get passionate about something, they are going to let you know. And they will work toward change in those areas. They also like things very in their place. Perfectionist. Oh, guys, says they've removed the 40-minute time limit on this. Hey, we'll still keep it to around that just to keep it like easy to digest, but it's nice that we don't have to rush. So you can see idealistic, principled, purposeful, self-controlled, perfectionistic. Like that is a 1. Their basic fear is being corrupt or evil, and their basic desire is to be good, be a good person, to have integrity. They're going to become like a 7 in growth and like a 4 in stress. So kind of like I said before, like my roommate, when things are good, when times are good, like she's a 7. Super fun, life of the party. When she's more stressed, like in her room, like let me just deal with this on my own, a little more withdrawn, more like a 4 would be. We've laughed that, I hope she doesn't mind me saying this. I don't know, she might even be watching this. But we've laughed that like for her, like she's the kind that will have a glass of wine every night. Like that's part of her routine, is to have a glass of wine. But when she's stressed out, she does not drink at all. And it's because for her, alcohol is something to enjoy. Like a glass of wine is something to enjoy. And when things are good, like we go to a party, yeah, like let's have a couple margaritas by all means. Because it's a fun thing. It's not something to be used as like a medication for this bad day, if that makes sense. I always like these fictional ones, or like fictional characters that might kind of relate. Hermione Granger, Atticus Finch, Peter Pevensey from Lion, Witch, and Wardrobe. Cool. Make sense? Good. Questions about 1s? No? Alrighty. Okay, so what it's like to be a 2. I will say that for when I talk about this with like I did a thing on this for my dad's church's like women's ministry. And if you have grown up in faith or religion, especially if you're like a good old Southern Baptist girl or a good old Methodist girl or something like that, oftentimes when you take a test, you will type out as a 2, even if you are not a 2, because the 2 is the helper. They are the one that is going to get in there and make all the casseroles and make sure that everybody is fed. And so sometimes it feels like we need to answer the questions in a certain way because that's what we've been taught as good old Southern faith-based women. And so it's interesting that a lot of times those people will type out as a 2 first until they read into it a little bit more and then realize that they're probably something else. So just kind of keep that in mind. So like I said, the 2 is the helper. When it comes to taking care of others, I don't know how or when to say no. I'm a great listener and I remember the stories that make up people's lives. I am anxious to overcome misunderstandings. I feel drawn to influential or powerful people. People think I'm psychic because I usually know what other people need or want. Even people I don't know well share deep stuff about their lives with me. It seems like people who love me should already know what I need. I need to be acknowledged for my contributions. I'm more comfortable giving than receiving. I like my home to feel like a safe and welcoming place for family and others. I care a great deal about what people think of me. I want other people to think I love everyone, even though I don't. I like it when people do something unexpected for me. Lots of people ask me for help. It makes me feel valuable. When people ask what I need, I don't know. When I'm tired, I often feel like people take me for granted. People say my emotions can feel over the top. I feel angry or conflicted when my needs conflict with others. Sometimes it's harder for me to watch movies because I find it almost unbearable to see people suffer. And I worry a lot about being forgiven when I make mistakes. So like I said, the 2 is the helper or the giver. We're not sure, but we think my mom might be a 2. She's still trying to figure that out. I don't actually know, and I'm starting to have a hunch that she might be a 3 and doesn't want to admit it. But one reason that we think that she might be a 2 is so she's like pastor's wife to the end, you know, classic Baptist pastor's wife. She's going to take care of everybody. She's going to make sure we've got what we need on Sunday morning, make sure we got this. But in stress, 2s go to 8 and can become very resentful that like people don't recognize their help. So for a 2, their basic desire is to feel loved, and their basic fear is that they won't be needed or wanted. And so in a stress situation, there can a lot of resentment can sneak in. But in growth, they become like a 4. They can become more creative. It opens up. They're more connected to their emotions and not just like, here's what people need me to be and what they need me to feel like in order to help them. So yeah, we're still trying to figure her out, but I can see a lot of 2 in her for sure. So they're generous, they're people pleasing, they're the first ones to ask you what you need. I have a friend who I have a hunch is a 2, and she's constantly like, hey, how you doing? How you feeling? How's it going? What do you need? Are we okay? Are we good? Not are we okay, but like, are you okay? Are you doing all right? And so yeah, that's very characteristic of a 2. Lots of teachers are going to fall into 1, 2, and 3, especially theater teachers. Actually, when you get into the theater teacher world, lots of them are 1, 2, 3, or 4, because 4 is the very like artsy, creative type, but 2s being helpers, being givers, like lots of educators fall into that 2 realm. So don't be surprised if that's maybe where you fall. Okay, so what I'm thinking is that this would be a good place to stop for right now, and I'm going to go to, you can still look through the rest of these at your leisure. I know you probably don't have a lot of free time right now, but you know, if you need something to do. Okay, so this website right here, this tiny URL is going to take you, it should take you to the Your Enneagram Coach website. And up at the top, it'll say, start my free test, something along those lines. Like I was saying before, you have to put in an email address, probably toward the end. But it does give you like they're not super spammy at all. And it'll give you a good idea of what your number might be. And then you can kind of research it a little bit more and see. I think the test takes like 10 or 15 minutes, maybe like 12. But yeah, just like be super honest with yourself. Try not to ask like other people like, do you think I'm this? Because that's not the point. Like it's like, how do you respond to things, if that makes sense. And then if you look at the next slide here, that's the link to like all these resources, all this stuff that the slide share. And then there's a document in there that's like some of my favorite books, some of my favorite Instagram accounts, resources, like a document in there that outlines all of them a little bit more. Yeah, but I think that's a good stopping point. But we have unlimited time now. So if people want to chat a little bit about it, we can do that. And then as people need to duck out, they totally can. Or people can just say hi as well.
Thanks, Kaylin. I'm gonna head out.
Bye.
Let me know about next week. I'm gonna do it.
Yeah, because I'm thinking maybe Thursdays will be Enneagram chat time. And anybody that wants to jump in can jump on in. Make it happen.
Bye, love.
Bye. Anybody else have questions or?
No, thank you though.
Good to see you, Stan.
Yeehaw.
You hanging in there?
Plugging away.
Good.
Y'all have a good day.
You too. I don't know if anybody knows how.
Bye everybody. Thanks, Kaylin.
Bye. If anybody knows how, like I've never recorded any of these things. I've actually never I hosted like one just to chat with some friends, but I have to figure out how to post it somewhere for everybody. So anyway. Okay, well, I'm thinking about like, y'all let me know, because I was like, again, I'm just bored and I just want things to do. So I was thinking that like maybe on like Tuesdays, I could do something a little more theater related, and then Thursdays, a little Enneagram action for anybody that wants to do something. Again, I'll run out of things to talk about, but I'll just find new things. I'll research it.
Kaylin, when you set up your Zoom in settings, you can record them.
Yeah, I've got it recording. I know that much. I'll just have to figure out how to go in and actually post it later.
Oh, okay.
So I did figure that much out in the beginning. I think. I hope
I'm keeping them all in one folder. So.
Okay, cool. That makes sense.
I don't know if that would help. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Again, it gets more interesting when we start talking about the actual numbers. You start figuring out what yours is. I got obsessed real fast. So.
Okay, I'm going to leave. Bye.
Bye. Any other questions or anything?
I have.
Did somebody say they have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. Hello. I did the test earlier in the week, and it gave me like this huge pie chart with how big of slices my numbers came up, and my 5 was a 98 and a 1 was a 97. Mm-hmm. Like they were very, very close, I guess. And I mean, obviously, I'm just wondering, because really I identify more with a 1 in terms of everything. I mean, there are parts of me that are a 5, definitely, but
absolutely, there are parts of me that are a 5. No, I think when it comes down to that, like especially when it's that close, it just means that like you answered some questions there, especially with this one, like it'll kind of whittle you down to 2, and then you start kind of trying to figure. And so when it's that close, I think that's when it becomes even more important to just like read about the 2 of them. And so like go into this slideshow thing and like look at what it's like to be a 5.
Right.
And then it'll start helping you. The more, and honestly, this is going to sound so dumb, but it is so true. If you start looking at the Instagram accounts and the like silly things that they post, like you will start being like, oh my gosh, yes, that is me.
That's totally me. Oh, that's funny.
And that sounds so dumb. And it's not clinical at all, but none of this is. But yeah, I think then you have to just start kind of reading about things and really figuring out like, oh yeah, this definitely feels more like me than this one.
Do you know that the whole, because I'm kind of thrown off by what you do in stress and what you do in calm, right? So like if I am that one, which I do believe I probably am, the stress is a 4. Like that's when I act out in stress, but it shows, where does it show like the stressful things that a 4 does?
Yeah, so if you look at, let me go into this folder really quickly. I think, yeah, okay. So if you look at this favorite Enneagram resources or that Enneagram personality types document, that's there, it's gonna tell, like there are some things in there that can help with that. And so, hang on, let me get this to open. On the websites, like the EnneagramInstitute.com, that one has a lot of information about that growth and stress stuff.
Okay.
And it'll tell you kind of some of those things.
Awesome.
All of those websites will have some stuff about that. And like the Your Enneagram Coach, or there's an Instagram on there. I'm going to add it because I think it's just my Ennea type. I think that's what it is. Something like that. Those are going to have some great resources on like what a 3 looks like when they're stressed or that kind of thing. We have tons of stuff on there like that. So yeah,
Gotcha.
all those things.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
No, it was fun, y'all.
Caitlin, this is Katie Grimmer. So, hi. When are you going to do next week's meeting? Same time, same day?
Yeah, I was kind of thinking, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'll kind of poll people a little bit and see if like 3 o'clock is better or something like that. We have our office hours at just until 2. But I know some people might have them longer. So maybe pushing it to like 3 instead of 2. I don't know.